We are going to be in Numbers chapter 34 this morning. So if you could please open up your Bibles to Numbers 34. If you're not aware of where that is, it's near the beginning of your Bible. It's in the Old Testament. It's the fourth book of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and then the book of Numbers. And it has been a month since I have been in here on a Sunday morning, and that's because we had winter camp one Sunday, and then the following Sunday was the fundraiser burrito sale that we did for our mission team. And then last week I was in teaching for Pastor John in the sanctuary. So I am back, and it's good to be back in here. I actually do miss coming in here, being in here. Even when I'm in the sanctuary, I'm still thinking about the high school room and what's going on out here, and always anxious to get back. And if you're not sure what Numbers is all about, or it's been a month and I don't really remember, I'm going to just sum it up for you real quickly. The story began really in the book of Genesis, and what happened was that the children of Israel, the people that we're talking about, they were slaves in Egypt. Okay, there was obviously a story leading up to that. But where we are now is that the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt. And God decided in the book of Exodus that he was going to send Moses, a man named Moses, to go and lead the people out of Egypt, out of slavery, into freedom. Okay? And then he had a land that he had appointed for them. It was called the Promised Land. It was the land of Canaan. And it should have taken them, once they left Egypt, it should have taken them a week or less, week tops, to get to travel over to the Promised Land. What happened was they got to the Promised Land and they doubted God and would not go into the Promised Land like he had told them they needed to do. And so because they doubted God, he caused them or led them around the wilderness for 40 years until all of that generation, that older generation that was alive at that point, had died off. And so by the time that we get to Numbers chapter 34, we are looking at the second generation out of Egypt. These are the sons and the daughters, the kids and the grandkids of that original group that wouldn't by faith move in. And God had said, listen, the next generation they're going to live by faith, and we're going to go into the Promised Land. And so that's where we're at now in Numbers chapter 34. That was summing it up super fast. Obviously, there are lots of details in there. One of the things that we need to understand is that all throughout the journey, it most certainly has not been picture perfect. From that first group that would not by faith go into the Promised Land, they doubted God. Throughout the rest of that generation, and even this second generation that is about to go into the Promised Land, they've been problematic all along. Not every single point, not every single day, but far too many times. And really the overarching theme of all of these books and this story, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy, which is the next book, all of those, the first 5 books of the Bible, really the major theme across all of them is God's faithfulness. That even when people mess up and fail, or even when they are faithless, God remains consistently faithful. And that's very comforting for you and I. When we gather here on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night, Sunday morning like we are right now, oftentimes we come in, we're looking our best. We've got our part in our hair just right and got enough gel to pack it all down so it's not all poofy, and, put on the right kind of clothes. And we can come in here looking presentable and looking like, man, I got it all together. Girls might, you might got your lashes or your brows on fleek or whatever, and you're just feeling like, okay, I've got everything in order and I'm good to go. And we can come in here looking at one another and see really a facade of what is really happening. Many of us, I won't even see many of us, I'm going to take a gamble. I'm going to be a little crazy this morning. All of us struggle with different things. Sins that we might struggle with. Thoughts that it might be, or it might be actions, or things that we're saying, or things that we're watching, or attitudes that we have. We all struggle with those different things, so that we understand that this church is not a place for perfect people to come and give to God. What it is this place ends up being a hospital for people that are struggling with sin, not necessarily sickness, but with sinness. We come in here and gather because we need to be here, because we need to worship, because, man, it's been a rough week. And you know what? My faith went, it was like really great on Monday, and then all of a sudden it took a dive on Tuesday, and then it kind of leveled out on Wednesday. But Thursday it took another dive, and then on Friday I was with my cousins, and I really messed up, and I did such and such. And then what we do is we gather here so that we can worship together, pray together, and obviously read God's word and find out about his faithfulness, because we need to remember that God is faithful. His people have been up and down in their walk of faith, just like you and I. But God remains faithful, loving them through it all. And what that does is it assures and reassures you and I that even in our ups and in our downs and our failures and our giant faith and then our miniature faith and all over the place, God remains faithful. God continues loving you and I and doesn't give up on us. That's why that promise in the New Testament that he who began a good work will be faithful to complete it is so extremely important and dear to some of us. We go, yeah, God started the work, God's going to finish it. I'm a hot mess. Hot, not in a good way, just a mess, and yet God is faithful and he's going to finish the work that he started. That's good news. And so really, that's what Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, and you just keep on going. Joshua is part of the story, Judges, Ruth, First, you just keep on going all the way through. The overarching theme or story of the Bible is that God is faithful, he loves us. And that does not stop. It's like Romans chapter 8, Paul told us that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. So we find ourselves in Numbers 34 and 35 today. And we will look briefly at 34. And we will look briefly at the first half of 35. And then we'll slow down and spend a little bit of time, pump the brakes in the second half of verse 35. Some of you take notes, and if you take notes, let me put this up here so you can see what's going on. Again, we will not spend much time in chapter 34. I'll just point something out real quickly. We've got two main divisions in the chapter, and the first one is called land lines, okay? And we will be talking about borders, okay? Land lines. And then the second division is called land leaders, and I'll actually start backward just a little bit, again, because we're not going to be spending much time. I'll real quickly tell you what the land lines and land leaders are. The land lines, we're talking about the distribution of land once they go into the promised land. Okay? Once they get in there, they have these 12 tribes, and they were going to each get a portion of the promised land. And so God is describing that in the first half of the chapter there. And then the land leaders, those are people that would be appointed to oversee the land distribution. Because yes, these are God's people, but sometimes God's people get a little stingy, don't they? We've got a white box in the back of the room right now sitting on that table over there. And man, it's got donuts in it. And what can happen, it's the craziest thing. You can come to church and you can feel like, man, you're like on a spiritual high, man. I'm so godly. I've been worshiping God, studying the Bible. And then all of that can go out the window if there are donuts in the room. All of a sudden, it's family. What Christian family? And we can trample each other getting to those donuts. And I do have to say that the majority of the time, it is the guys that do the trampling. They can make a run for those donuts, man. Like, oh, I got one for each hand. You know? And then the girls come around like, hey, is there anything left? Yeah, here, you can have some of these crumbs. No, never mind. Here, I'll eat them. Dudes can be that way, right? We can do that. We can do that. And so God here is telling them in chapter 34, when you go into the promised land, there's no stinginess going on. You're not going in and just grabbing whatever you can. Everybody's going to be appointed a certain portion of land, the landlines, and then there will be leaders to oversee that. Let me show you this real quickly. I know it's a little bit hard to see because of the way that it's oriented, but this is the promised land. You're seeing green here, okay? I hope that's green. I'm colorblind, okay? Green there, and then there's some gray. We'll talk about that gray in just a minute, but that green area was the land that God said, okay, this is going to be your land. These are the borders. And you can read through those, and it'll say from this place to this place, and this place to this place. But you can see right away that there's one, there are many different reasons why, but there's one big reason why this was such a wonderful, beautiful land flowing with milk and honey, and that is because it is a coastal land, a coastal country. You and I are familiar with this, aren't we? Where are we today? We are in beautiful California. We live here for one big reason. Why do our parents pay the high prices for gas and taxes and for food and for rent or mortgage? Why do we pay all of that money? Here's why. It's because we are situated very much the same way. Where we are at right here in beautiful Kentucky, it would take us 1 hour to get to the beach or to the mountains that are filled with snow. Today you can't get to the mountains because all of the roads are shut down, but anything that we want to do is within an hour. We want to go down to San Diego, spend the day there, in the big city, an hour, maybe, right? If we want to go into beautiful LA and see all of the homeless and different things, you can take a drive. And by the way, all of LA is not homeless. Okay, I've been there. There are some very beautiful parts of the city, but you can drive into LA. It might take a little bit longer than an hour, but you get the point. We're in a strategic spot. This is why we pay the big bucks, and plus all of the stars live in Hollywood. It's like everybody wants to be here. Palm trees and beaches and whatever else. So we understand God was giving them that piece of land. It's a coastal country, coastal land, and everything that they needed was going to be there. I don't know how many of you have ever traveled out of Southern California and into Northern California, but if you get on the 5 freeway and start heading up toward Sacramento, you're going to go through miles and miles and endless miles, it seems like, of farmland. And it's incredible how fertile the land is. Did you know? I don't know if you knew this or not. Let me share an interesting fact with you. You want to know? I'll tell you anyways. Okay? Did you know that California is actually a large producer of rice? That we actually have rice fields here? Okay? A lot of us thought that stuff was all imported from, some of the Asian countries or whatever. No, we actually have rice fields here. It's incredible. And so we grow so much here, but it's fertile. We're a coastal land. Well, the children of Israel were going to get this land, or that's what was promised to them, I should say. I got to be careful. Now, in the gray, you can kind of see off to the right of the green area. Last time we were together, we talked about the Reubenites and the Gadites, and how they wanted land on the east side of the Jordan. Well, that's their land there. That's where they were at, on the east side of the Jordan River. Now, you do need to know, and we'll find this out as we continue our study through Deuteronomy and Joshua, Judges, and all those different things, that they actually, the children of Israel, did not end up possessing all of that green area. Why not? I thought God promised it to them. He did, but they doubted God. And so because they doubted God, they ended up not taking all of that land. They missed out on a whole bunch. Let's move into chapter 35. We've got 3 main divisions in chapter 35. The first is cities for the Levites or Levites. And then we'll see cities of refuge. And then lastly, as we finish up, we'll see the sanctity of the land. And let's see, I think, we'll get to that. Let me leave it back over here for just a minute. Let's look at the first 8 verses of chapter 35 for just a few minutes. Again, we'll move through there a little bit quickly. Cities for the Levites. Let me read something to you. Numbers chapter 18, verse 20. You don't have to turn there, but let me read something to you. Then the Lord said to Aaron, Aaron was the high priest, "You shall have no inheritance in their land, nor shall you have any portion among them. I am your portion and your inheritance among the children of Israel. So as they were preparing and talking about going into the promised land and getting a portion of land, this group of people, the Levites, the family of Levi or Levi, they were told, you're not getting a portion of land. You're not going to get your own country or your own city. Does anybody know why? Anybody besides Joab know why? If no one else does, then we'll go to Joab, because I know that Joab knows the answer. Anyone know why the Levites were not getting an official portion of land?
Weren't they in the middle for like the tabernacle?
Yes. Thank you very much, Melissa. They were servants in the tabernacle. Essentially, what that means for you and I is that they were servants in their church. They were serving the priests, the priestly family, Aaron and his sons. Those were the priests. And so the Levites had been told way back in chapter 18, verse 20, listen, when it's time to distribute the land, you're not going to get an official piece of land. It's not going to be called the country of Levi, okay, or the city of Levi. Now, as we'll see, they'll get some land. We'll see that in just a moment. But what God was telling them was, instead of getting a portion of land, God says to them, you're going to get me. God says, you're going to belong to me, and I'll belong to you. I am your portion and your inheritance. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Most of us want things. We want stuff. Most of you right now, if I asked you, hey, what are you going to school for? You'd probably tell me, well, because, I want to end up going to college. Well, why do you want to go to college? Well, because, I want to get a good education. Why do you want to get a good education? Well, so I can get a good job. Why do you want to get a good job? So that I can buy stuff, so that I can buy a nice house, so that I can buy an RV, so that I can, buy things. Well, for this group of people, they weren't going to have a portion or an inheritance. What they were going to get really was a relationship with God that the rest of the people did not enjoy. The rest of the people enjoyed a relationship with God, but the Levites were going to experience God in a different way. So what a benefit. But in verse 1, we read this, Numbers chapter 35. And the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, saying, command the children of Israel that they give the Levites cities to dwell in from the inheritance of their possession, and you shall also give the Levites common land around the cities. They shall have the cities to dwell in, and their common land shall be for their cattle, for their herds, and for all their animals. The common land of the cities which you will give the Levites shall extend from the wall of the city outward 1,000 cubits all around the city. And you shall measure outside the city, on the east side 2,000 cubits, on the south side 2,000 cubits, on the west side 2,000 cubits, on the north side 2,000 cubits. The city shall be in the middle. This shall belong to them as common land for the cities. What is he saying there? What he's saying is, listen, Israelites, each of you is going to get a portion of land. I think this is kind of a funny thing here. But in verse 2, he told them, you're going to get a portion of land. Verse 2, he says, you're to give the Levites cities to dwell in from the inheritance of their possession. In other words, God is saying, I am going to give everybody a portion of land, each tribe. But what I want is for you, from your portion of land, to take a small portion of your own land and give that to the Levites. I think it's funny for one reason. God had to tell his people, do not be stingy. Now, probably none of you in here have ever experienced this. So I will share this with you since you're not familiar with this at all. Because no doubt, all of you, as I look around, all of you are so very giving. When you get something, perhaps, let's say from your parents, okay? Could be candy, could be a new video game, whatever it might be. There are times when some students, again, none of yourselves, get stingy with those things. And mom and dad have to say, hey, share with your what? Brother and or sister. Share with them. Again, as I look around, all of you are looking at me puzzled. Like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I always share with my siblings. I would never be stingy. I know, that's why I'm explaining this to you, because you're not familiar with this at all. Okay? When I was young, I was stingy with my stuff. No, you cannot play with my Legos. Get out of here, to my sisters. Get out of here. No, you cannot have some of my shake or some of my fries. No. It's funny. We can get things, I'm sorry, not we, me, other people, other students, bad students, not students in here. But some students can get things from their parents freely and then get stingy with it. Get something from their parents and then they're like, no, I'm not sharing it with you. And the parents have to make them share. You better share those Legos with your brother and sister. But they're going to lose them. So what? You didn't even buy them. This happens in some families. None of you, right? No. You guys never been stingy in your life, right? These people were about to receive land for free. And God has to tell them, make sure that you think about the Levites and that you share with them. And so they were to give a portion of their land to this group of people, the Levites. And they were also to give a portion of land for some small-time farming. Around the city that the Levites lived in, they would have an area for their animals to be able to graze, or to be able to house their animals so that they could take care of themselves and their needs and the needs of their families. But God had to tell them, make sure that you share. Remember that these are not perfect people. And you and I must remember that we are not perfect people. That we are very much in need of God. Yes, even for those of us that are Christians, we need God on a daily basis. Because if we do not have God working in us, we too can get so very stingy with the things that we have. God has freely, if you're a Christian, He has freely provided salvation for you. And yet we can be so very stingy with that, can't we? And not share it with anyone. No, you can't have this free salvation. It's only for us four, no more, shut the door. Nobody else is allowed in. We have got to be so careful that what we have received from God freely, we need to be willing to give that away freely. That goes with everything, really. If you have money, if you've got clothing, whatever you have, it's been provided to you. Even if you work. How did you have, the ability to work? Where do you get that from? God gives you that. And so we need to be willing to let go of things or hold things loosely. Have it. God gave it to me, I'll give it away. Not a problem. When we get stingy, it's an indication that we do not really understand how we have received from God so very freely. So they were going to get some land, but there was more land in addition to that land that the Levites would get. Look at verse 6. Now among the cities which you will give to the Levites, you shall appoint 6 cities of refuge. And we'll talk some more about that in a few minutes. To which a manslayer may flee. And to these you shall add 42 cities. So all the cities you will give to the Levites shall be 48. These you shall give with their common land. Now, this is a really neat setup. Okay, we'll talk about what cities of refuge are in just a moment. But let me explain to you, all these tribes would be spread out throughout the land. Remember that? They were supposed to have all of this land. You got tribes all over the place throughout the country. Now, each of those tribes, having been spread out all across the land, they would be taking a portion of their land and giving it to the Levites, who were the temple servants. Okay? So now, all of a sudden, what you have is a godly influence from the Levites, because they work in the tabernacle. They serve alongside of the priests. So there's godly influence now spread out all throughout the country. You see, if it was all concentrated in one spot, that godly influence, then it's possible that people might come in from the north and begin to influence the people. Or if they were all in the north, they might come into the south and begin to influence the people. But God set it up so that everyone is spread out throughout the entire country. Thus, there is an opportunity for godly influence throughout the entire country. Now, that teaches us a biblical principle, and that is this, that you and I, for you and I this morning, I should say this afternoon, we will be out of here in about a half an hour, a little bit less. It's going to go fast. You and I today, listen, I'm going to share something with you. I don't know if you're going to hear this from another youth pastor, but the very best thing that you and I can do today is to get out of here as fast as we can. Get out of where? Out of church. Why in the world would we want to get out of church? Here's why. Because you and I are receiving from God's word right now. And if we stay in here, we receive from God's word, and then we stay in here, the word of God just stays in here. What we need is to take what we learn outside of these walls as fast as we can. There is a world outside of these walls, out here on Scott Road or at Albertsons or over at Submarina or over at, at the restaurants over on Newport. There are people over there by the hundreds, by the thousands that are dying and on their way to hell. And that if somebody doesn't come along with the good news, the gospel, and say, hey, listen, here's some godly influence. This is what the Bible says. I just came from church, and here's what the Bible says. God is faithful. If someone doesn't do that, then these people will continue to die and go to hell. So the very best thing with that in mind is to get ourselves out of here as fast as we can. Go have lunch at Red Robin or wherever you're going and be kind to someone. And if given the opportunity, share the Word of God with those individuals. Because to have all the Word of God is a wonderful thing. But if it's just stuck in here, then we're not doing what we should be doing. We need to be giving that away. So in other words, like the Levites, boom, we need to spread out, get out of here. We look around, we've got people from all sorts of different schools. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. Because you then take what you know and give that away wherever you are going to school or to your team or, in your neighborhood or at your clubhouse or with your family, wherever it might be. So that's the principle there. Now, let's talk about cities of refuge. Let's go back to these notes. Cities of refuge in chapter 35, verses 9 through 30. What we find out here is verse 9 says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan, that's good news, they will be crossing the Jordan into the promised land. When you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall appoint cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills any person accidentally may flee there. Let me just put this up here. These cities of refuge, to our surprise, were for killers, people that had killed another human being. City of refuge, a sanctuary city, was set up by God for people who had killed someone. Now, what we just read there in verse 11 is that they were, as far as we know so far, that it was set up for killers that had killed by accident. He will go on to explain some of the possible circumstances, but there are times when people are killed by accident. I didn't mean to, someone jumped out in front of my car. I didn't have time to stop. I hit them. I wasn't trying to do that. That would be one instance. These sanctuary cities or cities of refuge were set up for these people who had killed. Now, the word manslayer, and just a moment we'll read about murderers, is the same word in Hebrew. Same word. But the difference is whether it was planned or not planned, or whether it was by accident or whether it was done purposely. Verse 12 says, They shall be cities of refuge to you, or for you, from the avenger. Right? The avenger. because who likes those guys? No, just kidding. Everybody likes those guys. The avenger would have been, let's say that I got killed by somebody, whether accidental or on purpose. The avenger might be my son. Maybe my son would come along because, he's Mr. Buff. And he would avenge me. He would go after the person that killed me. Whether it was done purposely or accidentally, he would avenge me. You understand? He would go out and he would kill the person that had killed me. And so in verse 12, they shall be cities of refuge for you from the avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he stands before the congregation in judgment. So, the city of refuge was a place where if I kill somebody accidentally, I can hightail it off to a city of refuge. And these cities of refuge were spread out all over the place. I get myself to the city of refuge, and that is a safe zone. Once I am there, a trial will be had. And we're told here in verse 12 that the congregation, that would be a group of people that would judge my case. Sound familiar? Yes, it kind of sounds like our American justice system, which, by the way, we as Americans have very much corrupted, but no doubt, and these guys actually would end up corrupting their own judgment system, also the one that God had given them. But this congregation judgment. Now, verse 13 says, and of the cities which you give, you shall have 6 cities of refuge. You shall appoint 3 cities on the side of the Jordan, and 3 cities you shall appoint in the land of Canaan, which will be cities of refuge. Verse 16 begins to talk about if the person was a killer by choice. In other words, they purposely killed someone else. There are some important verses in here that you'll want to pay attention to. Verse 16 says, but if he strikes him with an iron implement. Okay? In other words, he picks up a piece of iron and purposely strikes somebody so that he dies. He is a murderer. There's the difference. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Now, this is kind of a big deal here. Somebody, please, real quick, I'm going to ask you a trick question, see if you can remember. In verse 16, who is speaking? Who's giving these instructions or these directions or these statutes, as he will call them? Anybody know who that is? Janice, what do you think? It's God. That means that God just established the death penalty. Verse 16. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Why did I stop and slow down and make such a big deal of that? Here's why. Because there is a raging argument today. It surfaces every so often. For some people, it's ongoing all the time. But it's death penalty or no death penalty. And some people are 100% against the death penalty. No way, never, doesn't matter what the person has done. And then you have people that are 100% against it. Kill them, kill them, kill them. And oftentimes, those two extremes are just that. They are extreme. And there's no room for any kind of reasoning. And you'll have people say, no way, no way, no way, never. And then you'll have other people just kill them right away. We don't need to discuss it. Just hang them right now, or put them in the electric chair, or the lethal injection, whatever it might be. And we need to be careful, because we as Christians, we understand that God set up the death penalty here in verse 16, but we ought never to be happy about that. We're not ever told or called upon or expected to be like, yes, we're Christians, let the person die. Or, yeah, he deserves death, let's just get rid of him, get him out of here. We ought never to be happy about anybody. Regardless of what they've done, we ought never to be joyful about somebody dying. You can make your case for, what about Hitler, people like that. Okay, we can discuss that. But generally speaking, somebody dying is not an enjoyable thing. It may be necessary in order to rid society of the individual before that individual continues to harm, hurt, or murder other people. But it's never something that we should enjoy. We don't want to find ourselves on that one extreme saying, yeah, just, kill everybody. We don't ever want to find ourselves there. The death of anybody is always a heartbreak. If it's a Christian and they die, it's heartbreaking, but we know they're in heaven. Something to rejoice about. But especially if somebody dies or is put to death and they were not a Christian, as far as we know, they are in hell, that's not a fun, enjoyable thing. That's not something that we should necessarily like. But we understand that God set this up. There are two big things that I am pointing out this morning. The first one was about the land. Why was that such a big deal? It's a big deal because there are people today whose argument is that Israel does not belong in the land of Israel, that the people should not be there. It's not their land. But we've seen clearly today, and those of you that have been around, we've seen it clearly since the beginning of Genesis, that God gave them that land. They may or may not be using it the right way. They may or may not be, properly, distributing land or using land, whatever. But we still need to understand that God gave Israel that land. We can be mad about it. We can argue about it. We can fight about it. We can hate each other over it. But nothing can tell us different that God gave them the land. That's all I got. I may not even necessarily like it, but that's what it says. God gave them the land of Canaan. But here's another one. God established the death penalty. I can argue about it. I can hate. I can vote. I can do all the things that I want to do. But in the end, God established it. I didn't. And I may not like it. I may go, man, I don't like the death penalty. But then someone might kill a member of my family, murder a member of my family. And then I might find my mind changed, saying, no, the death penalty is a good thing. I've got to be careful and find balance in everything that I do as a Christian. I've got to think. I can't just check my brain at the door. I can't do that. I've got to be thinking practically and critically. I got to be thinking. God says in verse 16 that, listen, the murderer shall surely be put to death. And if he strikes him with a stone in the hand, by which one could die, and he does die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Or if he strikes him with a wooden hand weapon, by which he could die and does die, he is a murderer. He's got to be put to death. Verse 19, the avenger of blood himself shall execute judgment in that case, shall put the murderer to death. Where he meets him, he shall put him to death. If he pushes him out of hatred, or while lying in wait, in other words, he waited, the person came, and then he killed him. If he hurls something, throws something at him so that he dies, or in enmity, he strikes him with his hand so that he dies. I punched somebody so many times, and when we hear stories today about people being beat to death, that's what we're talking about. The one who struck him shall surely be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when he meets him. So he's giving this the death penalty or corporal punishment to those that were deserving of it because they had taken life. God had actually already established that prior to this, saying that anybody that takes life, their life shall be taken. They got to pay with their own life. So God had established this already. This would have been payment for the family that lost a loved one. But it also would be, when used properly, would be a deterrent to other people murdering. Here's the next thing. Beginning at verse 22, in these cities of refuge, we find that in the city of refuge, you were given the opportunity or given access to a congregational jury. What is that? Verse 22. However, if he pushes him suddenly without enmity, he wasn't hating him, pushed him for whatever reason, however that happened. Maybe, in that time, maybe I got pushed by my ox out in the field. Me and my friend are talking. Yeah, that's a big pit you got there. Yeah, I know, that's going to be our new bathroom or whatever. And an ox comes up and pushes me. I accidentally fall into my friend. My friend falls into the pit and dies. It was accidental. If he pushes him suddenly without enmity, or throws anything at him without lying in wait, or uses a stone by which a man could die, throwing it at him without seeing him. So I'm clearing my field, I'm picking, oh man, look at this big stone. I go to throw it, well, just that time, my neighbor comes walking by and like, hey, what are you doing? Bam, gets hit in the head, falls down and dies. Okay? In verse 23, throwing it at him without seeing him, so that he dies, while he was not his enemy or seeking his harm. Then the congregation shall judge between the manslayer and the avenger of blood according to these judgments. This is what you and I call a jury of our peers. You guys will begin to get, after you graduate, you'll start to get notices in the mail from the county that you live in. And they will say, hey, you've been chosen for jury duty. How many of you have parents that hate jury duty? Yes, there it is. I do not care for jury duty, okay? I'm going to confess that to you. Now, it's a bad attitude on my part. It really is selfishness is what it is. Because I've been to jury duty lots and lots of times over the years. And I've only ever been on a jury one time. Okay? Every other time, I've had to wait in the jury waiting room all day long, or maybe, you wait all day long, and then they tell you, please come back the next day, and then they go, okay, never mind, your group's excused, you can go home. But I was here for, 7 hours, what are you talking about? Yep, thanks for your service, goodbye, see you next year. And it always seems to be a large waste of my time. Now, I was on a jury not too long ago, in fact, last summer. And it was interesting and all of that, but it was very long. And I just get selfish is really what it is. A jury of your peers or a congregation of jury is a good thing. You don't want just one person deciding. Even that judge who has been to school and has a fancy robe. You don't want that judge, you don't want him or her just deciding, well, I wasn't there, but I'm seeing all of this, information, and you know what, I don't really like your hair. Pfft, guilty, you're out of here. You don't want them doing that. You want a jury of peers, several people who are going to listen to your case, you plead your case, and you state your facts, and you do your best to defend yourself or whatever. That's what you want. Well, God set that up. That's why we have that in America. I don't know if you knew this or not, but there are lots of countries throughout the world that do not have the same judicial system that we have. And again, is our judicial system perfect? Absolutely not. Is it corrupt? Much of it is. Why? Because there are people involved, and people are corrupt. But still, the idea was given by God. Get these people to judge. Listen to the case. Verse 25. So the congregation shall deliver the manslayer from the hand of the avenger of blood. And the congregation shall return him to the city of refuge where he had fled. And he shall remain there until the death of the high priest who was anointed with the holy oil. What? Here's what God set up. The person, let's say I accidentally kill somebody. I take off as fast as I can to a city of refuge. Once I get there, I find the leaders or the court, wherever I'm going to, and I say, hey, listen, I accidentally killed my neighbor. And they say, okay, wait here. We're going to listen to your case. Okay? They do their best. Congregation, a group of people, they get together. They listen to the facts. Maybe the avenger shows up and says, no, he killed my uncle, or he killed my family member. Okay, hold on. We'll listen to all the facts. And they determine that I am innocent, that I didn't mean to kill somebody. I'm not labeled as a murderer. I killed somebody, but it was an accident. I'm a manslayer, but not a murderer. Okay, great. I'm exonerated. I'm clear. However, What God just said is, I would still need to stay in the city of refuge. And I would not be allowed to leave the city of refuge and go back to my home until the high priest, whoever the high priest was at that time, until he died. Now, maybe maybe the high priest was really old when I went to the city of refuge, and, he dies after a month. Well, then I can return to my home. But if the high priest, they were priests for lifetime, and so, so maybe, he's still pretty young. Now I have to wait multiple years before I can go back to my home. Why would God do that? Well, for a couple of different reasons, or at least one main reason. And that is to allow things to kind of die down, settle down. Because if I'm accused of murder and a jury says, hey, you're free, you know what, it wasn't murder, it was an accident, and then I just go marching back into my neighborhood like, hey, you know what, I'm a free man, you can't touch me, emotions are still high. The family of the loved one that was lost, they're going to have a hard time controlling themselves, keeping themselves from killing me. So it gives time for things to simmer down, to settle down. What he goes on to say is, in verses 26 through 28, that there were consequences to leaving the city. If the individual, let's say I accidentally killed somebody, I'm found innocent, I have to stay in that city. But man, I really miss my mom's tamales. And all I want to do is go home and sleep in my bed, man. And I decide, forget this. My mom's tamales are worth it. And I leave that city of refuge. And I go home, and I'm there eating my tamales, my mom's tamales. Oh, Mom, missed your tamales. I'm eating tamales. And the avenger, a family member of the person that I accidentally killed, sees me. That individual can actually kill me, avenge me, and they would not be charged with murder. That's what he said in here. Verse 26. But if the manslayer at any time goes outside the limits of the city of refuge where he fled, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the limits of his city of refuge, and the avenger of blood kills the manslayer, he shall not be guilty of blood, because he should have remained in his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. Verse 29, these things shall be a statute of judgment to you. In other words, I've set these up for you to judge. And in verse 30, look at this. But one witness is not sufficient testimony against a person for the death penalty. So I couldn't just come at Melissa like, yeah, I saw her do it just by myself. It would not be enough of a witness in order to judge her guilty of murder. There needs to be multiple witnesses. God's setting up this justice system. Lastly, let's finish up. We'll be out of here in just a few minutes. And that is the sanctity of the land. Moreover, you shall take no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death, but he shall surely be put to death. And you shall take no ransom for him who has fled to a city of refuge, so that he may return to dwell in the land before the death of the priest. So you shall not pollute the land where you are, for blood defiles the land. And no atonement can be made for the land, for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. All of that is saying this, that there were sins that if you committed, you could pay a certain amount of money, or you could offer a sacrifice, or do both, and have those sins forgiven, excused. In the case of murder, you could not do that. In the case of killing someone, you could not do that. You could not just, pay money. Let's say I killed somebody, it was an accident, I'm in the city of refuge, and I go, you know what, let me just give you $100 right now, and let me leave. You can't do that. Why? God is eliminating bribery. Bribery. Because bribery clouds judgment. There are people who can be bought off. Judges, witnesses, prosecutors, attorneys. People have a price, and you can give them money, and they'll say anything you want them to say. So God was eliminating that. No, you can't just pay money and get out of it. No. This is a lifelong thing. Finally, in verse 34, why is it sanctified? What the sanctity of the land means that the land is sacred. Why is that? Well, it is because of God's presence in verse 34. Therefore, do not defile the land which you inhabit, in the midst of which I dwell. For I, the Lord, dwell among the children of Israel. In other words, the reason that the land was sacred was because God was in it. And that is the only reason. The land that the children of Israel are going into is a land that is filled with idolaters, people who worship false gods. There's nothing special about the land except that God was going to be in the land with the people. That's what made it special. It's an important biblical principle as we finish, and that is that we can come in here and lift our hands high during worship, have a nice Bible, take lots of notes, sing loud, take part in all of the events. But none of those things make us right or righteous. None of those things make us godly. None of those things make us holy. None of those things sanctify or set us apart. Well, Chris, what does make us holy or godly or sanctified? What does set us apart? God and God alone. If I have a Christian t-shirt that listen to Christian music and have Christian parents and a Christian dog, how do you have a Christian dog? You know, you name him something like, Joshua or something, or like, yeah, give him a Bible name, So then he's a Christian dog. Your dog's not Christian, okay? I can have all of my Christian stuff, or I can speak Christianese. Hey, bro, hallelujah, praise the Lord, amen, right? I can talk Christianese, but if I do not have God, if I've not surrendered my life to God, if God is not living in me and through me, then there is no sanctity. There is no sacredness. I might be a cleaned up, Christian-looking person, but that does not make me godly or holy. The only thing that does is God. That's it. I say that as we finish because you and I have to be careful that we not walk out of here like, oh man, look at me. I went to church. I put my time in, check the box, everything's good, post it like, oh yeah, here's me at church, being holy, being godly. And, I've got to make sure that I'm not walking out of here with a fat head. My head's already fat enough. It doesn't need to be any bigger. You and I have got to understand that the only reason that we would ever be considered holy or godly is because of God. Just like God's presence was in the land and that sanctified the land, same thing with us. If God is not in my land, so to speak, in me, in my heart, living through me, then there is no sanctity. Then I'm just a cleaned up sinner. That's all I am. Then I'm just a person who goes to church. Church goer. Millions of those all over the world. Plenty of those. But those of us that have God, we've surrendered our life to God, and we have God living in us and living through us. That's where the holiness comes from, and I have to be careful. I've got to be careful that I'm not thinking that I am something great. Your mom, she thinks you're the greatest thing in the world. And she says, oh, my little baby boy, he's so special and beautiful, and he's just the best son in the world. And your dad thinks that you are the greatest daughter in the world. She's beautiful. She's pure. She's so nice. But those two people, your parents, are the only ones that love you like that. My mom, when she was alive, thought that I was the greatest son in the world. Everybody else thought I was a jerk. But my mom loved me. The only thing that makes us special outside of our parents' adoration, the only thing that gives, the only amount of goodness that is in me is because of God, if there's any. I've got to keep that in mind because that will keep me viewing myself where I should be. Not too high, not too low, just this is where I'm at. If I'm anything, it's because of God. And that will help to keep my attitude right. Father, thank you so much for this morning.